Hey there guys, welcome to the next tutorial here on the channel. We're going to be working on diagonal weaving in this video. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I really wanted to come up with the easiest and best way to show you before I actually film the tutorial here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to be using two different pieces of duct tape here. I have 4 strips of tape each, and these are about 4 inch long strips on each of these. 4 strips of gray tape here to make a small sheet that's about 3 1/4 inches high, and then I have another 4 strips of the candy corn Halloween themed tape, and that's gonna be my second sheet. Of course, when you're making anything woven, you always want to make your 2 sheets that are exactly the same size. Do any trimming to make sure that they're the same size, and then you can start cutting them into different pieces and then kind of weaving them together. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. The diagonal weave is a little bit different than the traditional weave, when you're going like up and down, but it's a little bit different. But there's a few similarities, but there's a few things you need to worry about when you're working on this. So let's get started on the tutorial. Alright, so what I like to do with all my weaving and stuff that I'm using with the duct tape, I typically like to use a ruler just to make sure that, all of the pieces are roughly exactly the same size. Now, if you were making like a wallet or something out of this way, you would probably just, cut out a sheet of tape that's about twice the size of this, so it would be about that long, and then you cut out 2 different sheets of two different colors. But I'm just going to use these 2 sheets to show you exactly how to do it. So with this diagonal weave, I'm trying to make sure that all of them are exactly the same size, and that's really something that you want to work on when you're trying to weave really anything out of duct tape, no matter which direction you're trying to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line straight through the exact center, of course diagonally, of the first strip. And don't worry too much about the pen, because you can always just rub it right off. It's not permanent by any means. And I'm going to do the same thing with the Halloween piece as well. And of course this is going to be the opposite way, but that's okay, because I will just cut it out and we'll use it on the other way. So we have like just about there. Now that's exactly straight through the middle. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do it one more time, and of course you can do this more than once. I'm just going to do it once on this side and hopefully measure it to be exactly the same. Same angle is important, and I'm going to do the same thing on that side. Then we're going to do these two other lines on this one over here, and they'll be a little bit easier to see on the gray. Once you have the lines drawn, it's time to cut them out. And typically if you cut directly on top of the lines, they kind of disappear, because if you split them right down the middle, they'll kind of be half of the line on each part of the duct tape. So what you want to do as you cut these out, you always want to make sure you kind of piece them back together like a puzzle, because that way you won't be able to confuse them or anything. Sometimes it gets really confusing when you're trying to work with these and make sure they're all going back into the same way that you cut them. So that's the first one. I'm going to take my second piece, put that down, and you don't have to actually make these lines totally even if you want to. You can always kind of squiggle them, kind of loop them around a little bit more differently. I have a whole bunch of methods to do that. Maybe I'll show you guys in a later video of a few ways of making some really warped looking woven pieces. Alright, now since both of these are going the exact same way with the diagonal, I'm going to flip these over, and I just dropped it down on my floor here, so I'll pick that up. And so now they're going the opposite direction. Now what we're going to do is we are going to piece them together. And you kind of want to work on this, just back and forth, kind of like you do with your typical weaving for the duct tape, except it's a little bit trickier because of the diagonal. It's if you're used to just weaving them with the simple rectangular pieces going up and down, it's a lot different. You really have to kind of get used to it, because it looks a lot different when you're putting it all together. So that's the first piece, and of course we'll take our second piece. I would typically always work with one on the bottom, and then this one's totally complete. You can see that's one giant piece all stuck together, and it's all just laying there on top of my mat, and then you kind of work from there with your second piece. So I'm going to rearrange this. It's really just a tug of war until you get the entire thing all put together. It'll fight you every step of the way, and it's a little bit different than the other kind of rectangular weaving, because you can't really just tape one side down, which is something you would typically do if you're using with the rectangular piece. You tape one side down, then work with all of them, and they wouldn't go very far. But it's a little bit different when you're working on diagonals. So now I'm just going to weave these other 2 pieces in just like this. Alright, so after much to do, I was finally able, to stick everything down just like that. So now what we're going to do is take our pieces of tape, and of course we have the customary sealing the entire thing down. So what I'm going to do is cut out one strip of tape, that's the length of the bottom of course. I'm going to cut this directly in half. And I'm going to cut out another piece of tape, that's the height of it, and I'll cut that in half, and that'll be my 4 strips to cover up the entire thing. So if you've worked with weaving duct tape together before, it's really simple. I'm going to take my first piece, I'm going to cover up about, say about 1/4 of an inch or so. I'm going to stick that down. Now instead of trying to peel the entire thing up and then working on it from there, I'm definitely not going to try to do that because it's all, kind of still together and holding together on the top here and the sides. So I'm going to cover that piece there. And the trick here when you're doing this is to make sure that it's always even all the way around. The bottom part doesn't make any difference on the other side because that'll usually be the inside of your wallet or the inside of whatever you're trying to turn this into. But the front part is really the part that matters when you're working on this. Alright, so putting our last piece on, making sure I can figure out exactly where the bottom part of the coaster, or not coaster, but the woven part is. Now what I'm going to do is very carefully going to peel the entire thing up and then flip it over and then fold all these pieces back on the back. And so as long as you're careful, you can flip the entire thing over and it should more or less stay exactly where it was. You might have to do a little bit of fixing to make sure. So now, as I said before, we're going to make sure it's all nice and flat. We're going to take our pieces, we're going to fold them on the inside of the back here. And if any of the parts are sticking out, you kind of just want to tuck those back in because it's really going to affect the overall look of the pattern if they're really stuck out too far, if they're not totally even all the way around. So that's the inside, doesn't look too bad. Now, and that of course is the outside, so you get that cool kind of like diamond shaped pattern with the crisscross woven. Alright, so that in a nutshell is exactly how you do the diagonal weave in duct tape. If you are trying to do this for a wallet or something, of course you're just going to be making a sheet of tape that's about, twice the size of this, about twice as long, and then you're going to cut out, of course, 2 pieces, 2 sheets, one gray color and one of your secondary color, which in this case was the candy corn here, and then you would just repeat this process all the way down. Just be very careful when you're doing it. Like I said, when I was putting just these 8 pieces together, it was kind of crazy, putting them together and trying to make sure they didn't, go all over the place, which happened a few times in between the seam cuts. So this is a cool little coaster you can make. I like to make, like woven coasters. Are really simple, and they're about this size with the square here, so you can put your glass or something, of course, on top of the woven coaster. And they do look pretty cool. It's definitely a much different pattern than the traditional weave, which is kind of, straight up and down, which is the rectangular weave. So hope you guys like this video. There's a ton of different ways that you can work with this. I will be probably in the future showing you guys how to make a few crazy weave patterns, which are kind of like in diagonal, but kind of going out in different angles, which is a little bit which it's really just a lot crazier when you're trying to stick everything together. If you thought this was difficult, it gets really difficult when you start to go off in a bunch of different crazy angles. So hope you guys liked the video. I'll catch you next time on the channel for more videos coming soon.